Hello, Andrew
Hello.
Jonathan Smith, writer, director of Grave Era,
Yeah.
and again, hello again.
Hello.
Lou Gregg, producer
Yeah.
on that film too. Grave Era, congratulations for the title. It's a funny pun.
Oh, thank you.
Well, the French people won't maybe get it, but it's quite good. So, can you tell us about the story behind this wonderful title? A very amazing story. You said that was true. So, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's actually something that happens quite a lot. So I first read about it with a woman in Belgium who had been declared legally dead. And then I was just like, this is so absurd and ridiculous, and it has to be made into a film. So I kind of started researching more about it. It's something that happens quite commonly, not a ton, but quite regularly. And yeah, there's like regularly a number of people in the US that are declared legally dead every year. And I kind of took all of these different stories that I was reading and the different things that happened to them and kind of merged them into one. And the woman in Belgium apparently went to court and lost, trying to get her life back.
That's crazy. Yeah. It's quite amazing. So, so that's, I mean, a wonderful pitch, of course, to start a film. And you chose the angle of comedy to talk about that. It could be tragic, okay? Because, of course, I mean, when everything happens, no, I won't spoil the film, of course. We won't say what happens to that woman. But the fact is, you can imagine what happens when you are legally dead.
Yeah.
It means that you, well, in administration, for instance, there is nothing bearing your name, so it's quite a problem.
Yeah.
So you make it a comedy. Can you tell us about your
Yeah,
choice?
I think as I was thinking about the idea, I think it was quite funny about the world that we live in. That if someone ticks the wrong box on a form or a piece of paper gets submitted accidentally, then someone's entire life can fall apart. And I think it just shows how absurd this kind of bureaucratic, admin-focused world that we live in can be. And so I wanted to kind of poke fun at that a little bit.
Yeah. And so there are very funny parts too, where on a more personal point of view, the reactions of the people, very close to that person, their reaction is not always very nice. And so it's sheer comedy. I mean, and it's very funny in a way, but at the same time it's worrying because you feel, well, what about the people around me? Maybe they feel the same towards me, and they will never say it until I'm dead. So that's behind laughter, I mean, there is always some serious thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So so it's quite thought-provoking at the same time because it makes you laugh a lot. But when you think about it, you feel the reactions and the situation. It's slightly scary, I must say.
Yeah, I think when we were writing it, we started talking a bit about A Christmas Carol and the Scrooge character, how he ends up kind of seeing what the world was like in moments that he didn't see. And so we wanted to incorporate some of that kind of dynamic of the fable of what happens if you get removed from your life. How do people react? And would you want to change anything about how you live based on how people would react if you died?
Yeah. So we won't spoil the end, of course, of the film, so we'll talk about that. People must watch it and watch it in cinemas, of course, because big screen is good for watching film. About the process, about the making of. So that you co-wrote the script. So between writing and shooting and then editing and the final result, in the process, and especially with the conversation you had with the producer, I guess, were there things that you added, you removed, or how did it evolve along the process?
Yeah, so I came up with the idea and then I went to my friend Abraham Kleinman, who is a comedy actor and writer, and wanted him to be a part of it because he has such a funny, humorous take on things. So as we were writing, my goal was to execute. I was like, I want to make something that we can easily create. And so there was this back and forth in the writing process of we do something that the story needs that's maybe a little difficult to execute. So there was a scene where you see her trying to get onto the tube and her card isn't working, and that was something that would require more budget than we knew that we could get hold of. So it was kind of writing and rewriting in a way that simplified the story and created a thing that was possible to shoot. And then we showed the script to Luke, and he liked it. That's how he came on board.
I did like it a lot, yeah. But I mean, just on that point, I think it was a pleasure to work with these guys from a production point of view, because they were quite conscious about these things. They were realistic to a degree of what can be achieved, right? So that was really handy. And I think it actually does that process of simplifying things, not just from a production point of view, but from a writing point of view too, actually does give way for a better story sometimes, you know? Yeah. And I'd say more times yes than not too.
Yeah, I agree, because I think if you're constantly questioning, is this absolutely necessary, then you get the story down to its very core, where there were, in various iterations of the script, lots of scenes that weren't absolutely necessary for the story, and most of them we pulled out before we even started shooting.
So that's what Antoine de Saint-Exupéry said, you know, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing else to add, but when there is nothing else to remove.
Yeah,
right. That's about the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Good idea. All right, so you mentioned the fact that those guys were really good at making things work properly. Yeah. I was thinking about the connection, because you've been living in Los Angeles for 4 years now, so this connection between, because in France we tend to think that American filmmaking is a kind of money-making industry, and very business-like model. So you need to do the things very professionally. Whereas in France we tend to be more artistic things. Money is not very important. Well, but the fact is, the British film industry and the American film industry are very closely knitted. Can you tell me about your experience as a filmmaker?
Yeah, it was quite interesting, because we were shooting around the time of the strike, the LA writers and actors strikes, and it was interesting then working with these people in the UK and them saying, oh well, a lot of our productions have also slowed down because we can't get the actors who with the Screen Actors Guild, or the writer of this project that was supposed to shoot in the UK is actually with the Writers Guild.
All right.
So that intertwining was quite surprising, but it did allow us to, then being an entirely British production, even though I was coming from the US to do it, it did allow us a bit more freedom than we maybe would have had if everything was up and rolling everywhere. Yeah. It gave me a bit more time to write, and then we had a bit more available crew because of that.
And do you work with America in terms of production?
I haven't yet. No? I haven't yet on a personal level, but one of the first things I observed working in the film industry, not as a producer but in the production departments, was actually how many films were being made in the UK, how many American productions were being made in the UK. So that for me is an instant bridge between the two countries, Yeah. It just made a lot more sense. I think they were getting their budgets a lot further shooting them locally in the UK, and that insight just I didn't expect it as much. And then I think there's a lot of companies that especially ones that have the commercial and narrative model. As well as strictly narrative kind of big production companies that do operate between LA and London. Yeah. I guess both offer so much in terms of the local labor and the local creative labor as well. The crew labor, but the creative labor. And I think that there has always been that kind of natural link between the two.
Oh yeah, I mean British talents have always been very
back and forth.
Welcome. Yeah. And I remember reading a lot of articles at the time of Brexit about the future of British filmmaking industry, and they were worried losing European funds, but at the same time they thought that they will attract funding from Hollywood, for instance. Has it changed the way? I mean, because some people thought that maybe independent filmmaking will suffer from it. Would you say that in Britain things have changed in those last few years, or is it about still the same?
I feel like whatever has pushed it in, you know, when we talk about like the big productions coming to the UK and shooting here, I think there's always kind of there's always a conscious effort by the local institutions like the BFI and whatnot in order to support independent filmmakers and, you know, storytelling on that level, which is, in my eyes, you know, it's a bit closer to what the European values are as well. Yeah. So, you know, you also almost have like two opposing forces in that way, you know, with like the larger commercial, like America production, and, you know, the local institutions that really champion, you know, independent filmmaking. So in a way, you know, you've had those two forces in tandem happening, and I think the result is they've just grown in their own individual respects, you know, equally.
Yeah, I was thinking when you said the American model is much more business focused, that's what I was thinking about, like the difference in terms of the environment in the US versus the UK is that those arts funding institutions, which creates a much more growth focused or like raising up people focused.
Correct, yeah.
Like focus of the industry, whereas the US, it is more about creating commercially valuable cinema.
Yeah, and well, the fact here in France we've got a CNC system, you know, using the money we get from the very big, you know, blockbusters to fund independent French films with it. Okay, so it's you need both, I think, to make it a sustainable industry.
And you need to care about the journey as well of these filmmakers who are starting up, and I think that's the point you were saying, you know, like it's, you know, it's not just a one-off investment in any way, you know, when you're reallocating the resources, whether it's, you know, from the government or if it's, you know, the lottery money or whatever it is, you know, it's you know, you want to plant the seed and water the plant as it grows too. So it's, you know, about building relationships with filmmakers, and I think the local institutions in the UK, and it sounds like in Europe as well, do that very well.
Yeah. Well, thanks to this, we've got very good films like Grave Era. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us here in Rouen, because it's a great pleasure to welcome filmmakers from Britain and the US to tell us about their craft. And I'm sure, I mean, people who haven't watched the film yet will take great pleasure in watching it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for being here.